From the moment we're born, the world begins to train us that our value lies in how much we give to others. Our time, our attention, our energy. The more available we are, the more loved we believe we will be, until one day we forget that we were never meant to be everything for everyone. In this pursuit of connection, we gradually lose connection with ourselves. We stretch our boundaries thin just to feel needed, ignoring the quiet warnings within us that whisper, we are becoming strangers to our own soul in the name of loyalty. What begins as love often transforms into silent servitude, and without ever agreeing to it, we become someone others rely on without question, yet rarely consider. Our time is taken for granted, not treasured. You may think your kindness will be remembered, but in reality, constant availability makes you invisible. People forget your effort. They start to believe you exist simply to serve their needs, not live your truth. But there's a quiet rebellion that begins when you decide to take back your time, not with anger, but with awareness. You stop replying immediately. You let a call go unanswered. You choose solitude over constant noise. At first, nothing seems to change. The world moves on, but something powerful begins within you. That small pause, that act of choosing yourself becomes a seed planted in the soil of your self-worth. And then, almost without warning, you start noticing the shift. The people who once demanded your attention begin to ask, where did you go? Not because they miss you, but because they miss the benefits of your presence. You begin to see how your constant yes built others up while slowly hollowing you out. And now your silence, your absence, it speaks louder than any words ever could. It unsettles those who were comfortable with your sacrifice. Some will get angry, some will act like you've betrayed them, but their discomfort isn't your failure. It's a reflection of how deeply they depended on your willingness to abandon yourself for their convenience. When you stop showing up automatically, the masks fall off. People reveal their true feelings, not in what they say, but in how they react to your boundaries. Your availability was never neutral. It was power, unrecognized. And that power returns to you. As you step back, your presence begins to carry weight again. No longer expected, it becomes sacred. You're no longer background noise, you're a voice that echoes with meaning. Some will leave, others will distance themselves, but that is not loss, it's purification. What remains is truth. What remains are the ones who love you, not your utility, not your performance, but your soul. You realize that true connection doesn't demand constant access. It respects your space, it honors your silence, and for the first time you begin to taste what freedom feels like. Freedom from being needed to be worthy. You learn that the world won't collapse when you choose yourself. You are not abandoning anyone. You are returning home to the version of you that once whispered, "Please take care of me too." Availability is not your identity, it is a choice. And when you begin to make that choice intentionally, everything changes. You stop living for validation and begin living from self-respect. Where you once feared being alone, now you find peace in your own presence. The silence that once felt empty now feels alive, with clarity, with strength, with the sound of your own heart finally being heard. You no longer rush to respond, rush to explain, rush to be everywhere for everyone. You allow others to sit with their discomfort. You give yourself permission to no longer carry what isn't yours. Every act of withdrawal becomes a declaration. I am not a resource. I am not a savior. I am a person with needs, limits, and a right to protect my energy without guilt or apology. You find that fewer people reach for you now. And that's okay, because the ones who remain don't pull. They respect. They don't expect. They appreciate. And that's the difference between draining and nourishing love. So remember this, your constant presence was never the requirement. It was a pattern. And patterns can change. When you stop being endlessly available, the world doesn't end. It rearranges, and you finally begin to live. Change rarely begins with noise or grand declarations. It starts in silence, in small, private moments where you begin to question the weight of your constant presence, and for the first time, you allow yourself to hold back without guilt. It's not that you disappear entirely, it's that you stop rushing to be everywhere, for everyone, all the time. You begin to slow down, and in that stillness, a new voice emerges, your own voice, one you had long forgotten. Those around you notice, though they can't always articulate it. You haven't said anything, yet your silence carries more weight than your words ever did. People feel the shift, but don't understand what has changed. You begin to realize how much of your life was lived on autopilot. How often you replied, showed up, or gave simply because it was expected, not because it was aligned with your truth. That realization cuts deep. Some people respond with confusion, others with frustration. They are so used to your immediate availability that your quiet pause feels like rejection, but it's not. It's just you finally listening to yourself. This subtle shift isn't about pushing people away, it's about pulling yourself inward, back to a place where your energy isn't constantly leaking into spaces that never poured anything back into you. You stop saying yes automatically. You stop explaining yourself when you need rest. And in doing so, you begin to notice how many of your relationships were built on the absence of your boundaries. There's discomfort in this, not just for them, but for you, because choosing silence, stillness, and space feels foreign after years of defining yourself by how useful or responsive you could be to others. You start to see clearly, the texts that only come when someone wants something, the calls that only ring when you're needed, not when you're missed. This clarity is painful, but necessary. And yet, despite the discomfort, you continue. Because each time you withhold your immediate response, you send a message, not of cruelty, but of care, for yourself, for your time, and for your energy. You were always seen as dependable, and now that you're less accessible, some begin to question your character. But the truth is, you haven't become selfish. You've simply stopped abandoning yourself. This internal revolution isn't broadcasted. There's no applause, no validation. But in your solitude, in the gentle reclaiming of your own life, there's a peace growing that others may never understand. You no longer feel the urge to fill silence with conversation, or to prove your worth through overexertion. You begin to trust that your presence doesn't need to be constant in order to be valuable. There's power in letting others wonder where you've gone, not because you're playing games, but because your absence forces them to reflect on how they treated your presence when it was freely given. People may say you've changed, and they're right, you have. You're no longer willing to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You are learning that self-respect often looks like distance. You begin to notice which conversations die without your effort, which connections only survived because you kept breathing life into them. It's a painful discovery, but also a liberating one. What once felt like abandonment now feels like alignment. You're no longer walking away, you're walking home, back to the parts of yourself that you left behind trying to be everything for everyone. It's not about cutting people off. It's about cutting the cords that tied you to a life of emotional exhaustion. You are no longer willing to bleed in places where you were never even truly seen. The subtle shift has now become your new foundation, a way of being that feels unfamiliar but true. You are no longer living to be accessible. You are living to be aligned, grounded, and free. And so the world adjusts. People come and go, but the core remains, you, not louder, not harsher, just clearer. In your silence, you have found the strength to be fully present for yourself, finally. There comes a moment in every life where you realize that your worth is not determined by how much you tolerate, but by how much you protect. And that protection always begins with boundaries, firm, silent, and sacred. Boundaries are not walls built in bitterness. They are the edges of your dignity, the invisible lines where your value ends, and the expectations of others must pause and reconsider their demands. For years, you may have mistaken people-pleasing for kindness. You said yes to be liked. You gave because you feared being left behind. But deep down, you always knew something didn't feel right. Each time you overextend yourself, a small part of your spirit dims. You silence your needs so others can speak louder. But eventually, your silence becomes unbearable, because no one else hears it but you. And so the shift begins. You start saying no, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. You no longer offer yourself in pieces just to keep a relationship from falling apart. You begin to choose you. It feels unnatural at first. You may question your right to draw lines, but slowly the guilt fades. And what takes its place is a quiet, powerful feeling called self-respect, the foundation of your real self-worth. Others will test your limits. They'll push, they'll question. They'll try to negotiate access to the parts of you they once took freely. But this time you hold the door. This time you don't fold. You begin to realize that not everyone was interested in who you are. Many were just interested in what you provided, your time, your emotional labor, your constant availability, and now that access is gone. The more you honor your boundaries, the more clearly you see who values your presence and who only valued your compliance. This clarity, while painful, becomes the light by which you rebuild your life. You stop trying to be liked by everyone. You stop performing politeness at the cost of your peace. And with every no that aligns with your truth, you say yes to yourself in a way that echoes forever. Some people will walk away, unable to handle the version of you that no longer bends. Let them go. You were never meant to be understood by those who only valued the version of you that served their comfort. Your life becomes quieter, but richer. You no longer surround yourself with noise disguised as love. The ones who remain are those who recognize your worth even when they cannot access all of you. You learn that real love respects limits. It doesn't demand, it doesn't guilt, it doesn't punish silence. Instead, it honors your boundaries because it honors your humanity, not just your utility. Self-worth is not arrogance. It is not pride. It is the knowing that you were not created to be consumed. You are not a product. You are a presence, and your presence is a privilege, not a possession. In a world that profits from your insecurities, building boundaries becomes an act of defiance. Each boundary says, I know my worth. I know my energy is sacred, and I will no longer be drained without consent. You are no longer afraid of solitude, because now you understand it's better to stand alone with integrity than to sit in company that erodes your soul in the name of belonging. As you rebuild your life around values instead of validation, you begin to attract peace, not attention. And peace is not loud or flashy. It's steady, like a heart that no longer skips for approval. You now wake up without the weight of pretending. You don't shrink to fit into places where you were never meant to thrive. Your boundaries don't just protect you, they reveal you. This is what self-worth looks like. Quiet confidence, fewer explanations, better sleep, stronger decisions, a life rooted in choice, not in fear, and love that begins within, not in others' approval. So you no longer chase closeness at the cost of yourself. You no longer hand out pieces of your soul to those who never offer theirs. You are whole. You are enough. And finally, you believe it. Change rarely enters like a storm. More often, it walks in unnoticed, quiet and subtle, until one day you look around and realize nothing feels familiar anymore, not even the person you used to be. You resisted at first, clinging to the comfort of old patterns, even the painful ones, because what's known feels safer than the unknown, and your fear whispers, what if this costs you everything? But eventually, the weight of pretending becomes heavier than the fear of letting go. You stop carrying versions of yourself you no longer recognize, and you begin to welcome the discomfort of becoming. There's grief in growth. No one tells you that. Not just for what you lose, but for who you used to be. You mourn your former self, even as you walk forward into something more real. People around you don't always understand. They notice you're quieter, different. Some try to pull you back, but you've tasted something deeper now, freedom, and you know there's no return. You start choosing differently, not out of spite, but from awareness. You no longer say yes from fear, you say no from clarity. And in that quiet refusal, your strength begins to bloom. The path is not linear. Some days you feel powerful, unshakable. Other days you miss the comfort of being small, hidden, safe. But even on those days, you do not turn back. Change humbles you. It teaches you that identity is fluid and nothing external can define your worth. You stop asking, who am I to change, and start asking, who am I not to? You learn to forgive yourself for the times you didn't know better, for the times you stayed too long, gave too much, forgot your value. You were surviving then. You're living now. The shedding continues. Habits, roles, expectations, things you once clung to now fall away like old skin. And beneath all of it, something ancient and true begins to surface. You start to feel peace in solitude. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels sacred. It's in those still moments that you meet the version of yourself that was waiting to be heard. You stop rushing your evolution. There is no finish line. You are not a project to be fixed, but a soul to be remembered, one conscious breath at a time, one brave choice after another. Those who stay during your transformation are not confused by your silence. They see your change as expansion, not loss. They love your essence, not your role, and those are the ones worth keeping. You redefine success. It's no longer about approval, numbers, or applause. It's about peace, integrity, and waking up without regret. That's the wealth no one can give or take from you. You are no longer ruled by urgency. You stop chasing moments that were never meant for you. What doesn't align quietly fades. What belongs begins to find you effortlessly. Change, you discover, is not something to fear. It is the very process that reveals who you really are when nothing is left to prove. The shedding is painful, but what remains is honest. You begin to love yourself in a way that isn't loud or boastful. It's quiet, like coming home after a long journey. No fireworks, just the deep exhale of belonging to yourself. You understand now, healing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like breaking, but every fracture is an opening, every ache a reminder that growth is still alive in you. The past no longer holds chains around your ankles. It becomes a teacher, not a prison, and with every step forward, you carry only wisdom, never weight. So you rise, not loudly but fully, changed not because you had to be, but because you chose to be. And in that quiet rising, your life begins to speak the truth you never could.